All right, I'm Mr. Olson, and this is the safety video for the Centerville Junior High School woodshop. I'm going to go through the safety packet, which I gave you in class, and you'll be able to review this before you come in and take the test. These are things that we will be discussing in class. This is just an extra opportunity for you to take in this information before you come in and take the test and make sure you have it all down. We're going to start with the top where it says general safety instructions. So that's where you should start on your packet as you're reading along, if you want to read along. Some people in past have taken notes, but I'm not requiring that. You do whatever you need to do to try to make sure you're prepared for this test. All right, so first of all, I'm going to skip over a few of these along the way as well, so please be aware of that. Number one, all work in the shop must have my approval. That basically means that you're not allowed to come into class and work on whatever you feel like that day. Okay, so whatever you're assigned to be doing at that moment is what you should be working on. You can't just grab some random piece of wood around and decide, ooh, I think I want to try to turn this into a whatever you feel like doing that day. Okay, our objective in class is to get done with our projects. When you get done with the bookshelf, which is the second project in this class, you then need to come up with an independent project, discuss it with me, plan it out, and then make that project. You can't just kind of make whatever you want on any given day. Second thing on this list says safe clothing must be worn at all times when working in the shop. Loose ties, loose sleeves, ragged clothing must be securely fastened or removed before operating machines. Rings, watches, and other jewelry can be dangerous when working with hand tools or machines. This is a very significant thing in this shop. There's some specific tools that this is more of a thing for and some that it's not much of a thing for, but the thing that makes me nervous more than anything is long hair. But really we're talking about anything that might get caught in a machine. So you figure if this is only for machines that are plugged into the wall. The machine is plugged in, it's got a motor, it's got power, it's spinning really fast, and your hair gets caught in it. You can grab your hair and kind of pull it in. Truth be told, the only time this has ever happened in my class in the 12 years I've been teaching was somebody who got their hair caught in a palm sander, which is not a big deal. Actually, I can show you one right here. It's a palm sander. And a girl got her hair caught in the palm sander, which I ended up having to pull apart the sander to get her hair out. But it is always a concern, so we need to be careful and be vigilant about making sure that we have our hair tied back. But it's also not just about hair. It could be loose clothing, it could be your sleeve, it could be jewelry. There's a lot of different things that you could get caught in machines, and you need to make sure that you don't present yourself in any way to the machine that gives it a chance to grab a hold of you. That's going to be much more later in the semester. In the beginning, we're just going to be working with hand tools. Number three, there's a lot of things on here that I crossed out that I'm not going to talk about, that I'm not going to read through, because they all kind of hover around the same general concept. Number three says safety procedures requires the elimination of clowning, playing, scuffling, and participation in other non-productive activities. No running in the shop. I have a saying in my class that every student that has ever been in my wood shop has heard, which is that be where you are. And that means that at any given moment in life, you need to think about where you are and behave appropriately for that situation. If you're out on the playground playing basketball with your friends, you probably should be a bit of a goof off as you're having fun and playing around and joking and saying things like you ain't got no game and such, and that's completely understandable. You're out on the basketball court with your friends. Okay, but once you get to school or once you get into a classroom, that behavior should lift a little bit. And when you come into a class like this, it's a wood shop where there's a certain level of danger involved in the classroom because people could hurt themselves in this classroom. I require that behavior to come up really high, which means you should not be running in this classroom, goofing off in this classroom, playing in this classroom in any way whatsoever. Your goal should not be to make people laugh. I really have no room in this classroom for anybody that's trying to be the class clown. This is just not the appropriate place for that. So you don't throw things in this classroom. You just generally be a well-behaved student in this classroom. That doesn't mean you can't have fun in this classroom. It just means you can't do things that are unreasonably dangerous in this classroom, such as goofing off or playing or distracting other students while they should be paying attention to whatever it is they're doing. Okay, so that's going to cover a lot of the information on this test, or the information on this paper you have in front of you. Number 4 talks about injuries. No matter how small the injury is, you got to tell me about it. Here's an example would be if you get a paper cut, just tell me about it. I'm most likely just going to give you a Band-Aid and say, here you go, wash that and put it on there. But it's not just the small little nick or the splinter or the paper cut. It's also if you get bonked by something and you think, oh, I'll just shake that one off. Like somebody's walking around and they hit you in the head with a board, which honestly, I can't actually tell you a time in this 12 years that has happened, but still I'm using that as an explanation. And your head hurts, but you're just gonna kind of tough it up and kind of go through your day. But later in the day, you pass out in PE and nobody knows why you got hurt, and the school is not aware of the fact you got hit in the head by a board. So no matter what kind of injury you might have, you need to let me know about it so that I get to decide whether or not it's something that is significant and something that I should do something about. Okay, so no matter how small the injury is, you just need to tell me about it, okay? So number 5 is talking about debris not accumulating in the path of travel. We need to make sure that everybody can walk around this room safely and without concern about tripping on things, which means that once we get to the point in this class where we are doing anything but sitting in our chairs and discussing stuff, we're going to see to it that all backpacks, all science projects, all things that you brought with you, a sweater, a teddy bear, whatever you brought with you, all this stuff needs to be stored away. It can go underneath the desks, completely underneath the desks, or it can go into there's a room over here on my right that it can go into. There are different places in the room where we can put the stuff. Sometimes there's space underneath the tables. We don't want to put them on top of the tables because that's the workspace and people need to be able to use that workspace, but we need to basically store everything away. But then it also basically means don't let things fall on the floor. Like you're working with some wood and some of your wood falls on the floor, you need to pick that up. We need to keep the floors completely clear so that people can walk around comfortably without worrying about bumping into things. All right, so we're skipping 6 and we're going to go on to 7 regarding carrying long objects. There are 2 questions on the test that involve long objects. And turn this way with the camera. So this is what I use as an example when I'm talking about long objects. There's 2 different questions on the test regarding carrying long objects across the room. One of the things you need to know is if you're carrying the long object by yourself, you want to lift up the front end here so that it's high enough that it's not going to hit anybody's head. By lifting the front end up, I'm dropping the back end down, which means that as I walk around, I might hit somebody's ankle, but I'm not going to hit them in the head, which is mostly what I'm concerned about, is somebody getting bonked in the head with a board. Okay, if the other option so that was keeping the front end high enough to avoid hitting other people. The other option is to have one student at each end of the board as the 2 of you carry the board across the room. And between the 2 of you, I expect that the student on this end is going to keep an eye on that end, student on that end is going to keep an eye on that end, and between the 2 of them, they can try to make sure that nobody gets hit in the middle either. So having a student at each end of the board is the other answer that you're looking for in the test. So front end high enough to avoid hitting other people, and have a student at each end of the board are the things that you need to keep in mind of for the safety exam and for being safe in my classroom. Number 9, we're skipping 8. Number 9 is talking about if something is spilled on the floor. If anything is spilled on the floor, 2 things need to happen, and either of these are going to be fine for the test. One is that it has to be cleaned up, and that doesn't mean wiped up, because wiped up means you take a towel and you wipe it, which might be fine, but it might not be fine because it could be potentially oil, it could be turpentine or gasoline. We don't really use these things very much, but as a general rule, I'm discussing all options. If something is spilled on the floor, whatever it is needs to be cleaned up thoroughly. And number 2, I need to be informed about that so that I can make a decision as to whether or not it's cleaned up well enough, whether it's dry, whether I need to put some chairs out to kind of block that area, whether I need to warn the class about this area. One way or the other, I need to be informed about it, and it needs to be cleaned up thoroughly. Okay, we are moving on to number 10. Let's say you were cleaning up something that spilled on the floor, and it was, say, a finish of some sort, and maybe it's an oil-based finish, so it's combustible. It's like an oil-based finish, which means that it is a danger, it's a fire hazard. If you have some sort of cloth or some sort of paper towel or anything that has any sort of combustible material on it, such as gasoline or such, it needs to be put or thrown away in the covered red metal container, which the camera's going to now go over there and look at under the sink. That's a covered red metal container. They're under the sink, and that is where you need to put all things that are combustible. That's a fire hazard thing. We need to make sure that's done. And whatever was spilled on the floor needs to be cleaned up entirely and thoroughly. Okay, we're going to end this video here because it's been about 15 minutes. I want to keep these videos short. Please take time to read through this section again and then go on to the next video. Thank you.